Hey everyone, and welcome to our actual 2018 Game of the Year discussion, where we'll each give our personal top 3 games of the year, which can include games from any platform, and even though it was a port-heavy year for the Switch, ports are not eligible for our top 3, John. so let's get right to it. Derek, what's your third favorite game of the year?
You know, I was looking through this and I kept saying throughout the year, it's like, oh man, what am I going to pick for this year? Because there's been a lot of good games, but I haven't had a chance to try out the games that seem fantastic. Like, most of those games showed up that everybody's saying, oh, the game of the year showed up on my games I need to play more of list. So I was looking through it, and I actually found a pretty solid top 3, I felt. And number 3 for me actually turned out to be Octopath Traveler. Now, I only gave the game a lot when I reviewed it, but the music, the characters, there's a lot to really enjoy about Octopath, and it did show up throughout my, best categories. And it didn't quite come together for me with all the plot lines and everything else, and the true final boss is still just a mess. But what it does well, it does truly well. And if you're looking for an old school RPG on the Switch, something to take on the go, it looks beautiful, it sounds great, you really can't do much better than Octopath Traveler. It is just a classic experience. And what's great about it, and I think one of the things I had to keep in mind is this is a game that's meant to be played in chunks. You do not want to marathon this because it's very repetitious, especially early on, until the different stories start to branch out and become better. But just starting out and seeing how it's all taken care of, it's perfect for handhelds and perfect for just that short hour-and-a-half gameplay. Actually accomplish a lot. I really enjoy the game at its own pace, and it really, looking back through everything I played this year, it still stood out despite me only giving it a lot. It really is that enjoyable.
Well, just to clarify, like it a lot. It's a really good review score, so I don't think we need
not to some people. Sometimes
it should be. It's effectively our second highest review score. Besides Mind Blowing, which is extremely rare to the point that we don't really count that. So,
I mean, you literally like it a lot.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I think most of the games in my top 3 actually officially scored that as well. So, from me at least.
Yeah, I mean, it's still really enjoyable, and I really do love how people flocked to this game. People were excited about it, and it did really well. I appreciate the fact that something as old school as this, just given a slightly modern makeover, but still very much entrenched in that old school aesthetic, did so well. And it's like, okay, can we get more games like this? That's one of my biggest hope for Octopath.
Yeah, it's the kind of game I want more from Square as well, because this is Square back to their glory days, pretty much. And Square still do brilliant games, but I just wish they'll do something a bit more classic, like Octopath. But Octopath doesn't just stick to its classic roots, it's modernised in a lot of aspects too. And I completely agree with your opinion and your review for the game, Derek. It's just such a brilliant throwback that doesn't feel like it's trying to be a throwback. It feels new, while also being rooted in the classics.
Yeah, Octopath Traveler represents exactly what I want to see more of from Square, and you guys pretty much already covered the bases, but it's just fantastic. It's not perfect, but what it does, as you said, Derek, it does incredibly well, and it's a very special game, and yeah, I completely agree with what you said about it, Derek, and your review of it back earlier this year as well.
Yeah, when I played the preview event, I was thoroughly impressed by it, and I actually wish I had time to play more of it myself. But the presentation really does make it stand out, and the music as part of that. It won a bunch of our, I think, or several of our choices for best music of the year. And every time I heard my roommate playing it, I'm like, man, this is why I play the game just for the music alone. It's so good.
Yeah. Also, some of the best water I've ever seen in a game.
It's great.
Yeah.
Take that, Wave Race.
There you go.
Yeah, that Miiverse guy would be very happy.
Indeed. Okay, Ash, what is your third favorite game of the year?
All right, well, it was kind of weird this year because I didn't have any really strong opinions about my top 3 this year like I did last year, which made it very difficult because I basically just see these games as kind of my general top 3. The ordering doesn't mean as much to me, but even then, it's like, I don't know, I had a harder time really clearly identifying what my top 3 games were this year, and I didn't have time to play a lot of the games that outside of my main focus, like for GameXplain, such as Spider-Man or God of War or, Red Dead Redemption 2. I didn't get a chance to play any of those games. So with all that in mind, my number 3 game of the year was Celeste, and I've went on and on about this game in our other Game of the Year category awards, but this game is just so deeply special for so many reasons. The soundtrack is phenomenal. the atmosphere, just the way the music and the visuals combine to give you a really beautiful picture of exactly what it is that Madeline's going through, and the journey she takes up this mountain. And it's such a special game. The story it tells is very personal. It's very, very intense and very real, but it's basically a story that highlights mental illness, and that's something that I can personally relate to a lot, and I think a lot of us can. And there aren't many games that do that. Celeste not only does that, but it does so in an incredibly relatable, special way. And that's to say nothing of the gameplay, which is fantastic. I do have some minor problems with it. I do feel like some individual segments maybe go on for a little bit too long. So I do have a few issues with the gameplay, with the way the levels are designed, but either way, they're only minor issues. And this is a game that is fantastic and should be played by everybody, especially those who enjoy platformers and very personal stories from their games. So yeah, Celeste is my number 3 game of the year.
What I think is cool about Celeste is you could, if they had a budget of millions of dollars, the game wouldn't be any better. It's an indie game, and it doesn't feel like if there was a big publisher behind it, the quality of it would not improve any further. It's a game that's just rooted in its limitations, and it flourishes in them. It's so good, and I think it's kind of just the headpiece of what the indie scene is at the moment.
A game rooted in its limitations is such a fitting way of describing Celeste, because that also applies to the narrative of the game as well, I would say. And right. I love that. Yeah, as I think Ash already summed it up quite well. I mean, that's a great number 3, Ash. So, all right, John, what's your number 3?
So I knew my top 3 basically instantly, but ranking them is the hard part. I'm still kind of thinking should I change this around? But no, I'm going to stick with it. So my number 3 is Tetris Effect. I think Tetris is basically a flawless game. Games, they strive in a couple of main categories, but I think replayability is a big one, but also feeling lucky is another big one. And with Tetris, the blocks basically fall at random percentages, but some of them are also a different, a line block is less likely to come. And I think that's part of what makes Tetris so good, is you feel risky trying to get a 4-line Tetris and trying to get the blocks as high as they can. But when you finally get those blocks, you feel lucky, and it makes you just want to keep playing, keep being risky. And that's what makes Tetris so good. But Tetris Effect has this new twist on it, where it basically takes the Zen-like state of Tetris and dials it up to 11. So you have beautiful visuals, beautiful music. The actual title, the Tetris Effect, is basically a mental state that you get into. And in the debut trailer, they did this quote where they said they tested basically playing Tetris on a number of different people, and those with short-term memory loss would still see blocks just basically in their sight, even if when hours after playing the game they've forgotten actually playing Tetris. So that's what the Tetris Effect is.
That doesn't sound like a good thing, though.
Oh, yeah, I suppose it's not a good thing, but
that sounds like more of a
it's
problem.
It's a magical thing still, though. Yeah, and so basically Tetris Effect amplifies that. After playing this game, I was just thinking about falling blocks the entire time. I could just see nothing but L blocks everywhere. And maybe that's why I want it in Smash so much. I just can't get it out of my mind. But yeah, it's just a masterful presentation on an already masterful concept. So yeah, Tetris is one of the all-time greats, and Tetris Effect is just this brilliant twist on it. I think it's just so worth it. And when I first saw the price for it, I thought it was a bit steep. But after trying the demo, I was just so sold. I was sold on the music alone. If you sell me this album, I'll probably buy it for the same price.
It is pretty cool how they found a way to reinvent Tetris without really reinventing Tetris. It's more almost entirely in the presentation, whereas the gameplay is almost the same it's been for 30 years, minus the few incremental upgrades they've made to the core of it over the past few years. So yeah, that's really neat how they just found a completely new way to present this game in a way that really resonated with you and a bunch of people, it seems.
Not for everyone, though. I know you weren't all that impressed by it, Andre. I think you just played the demo, though.
To be fair, yeah, I only did play the demo, and I forgot that I actually didn't play it in VR, so that might be But I don't think you did either, though, right? So
I played the demo in VR, but the actual full game, that was done just on a normal TV. I do think VR is more special. You definitely feel more in the zone. But I still had a blast playing on the TV, though.
Same here. I absolutely love this game. It's just from a presentational aspect, it's absolutely groundbreaking. I really love this developer's other games as well. Tetsuya Mizuguchi, he does Rez and Child of Eden, and all of his stuff is very synesthetic like this, and I just love that kind of effect in games, and just when the visuals are married with the music in that kind of way. And as you said, John, the visuals and the music are both just phenomenal in Tetris Effect, and I don't feel as though the game maybe goes far enough to maybe reinvent or revitalize Tetris. It's true that Tetris is, you could make the argument that it's essentially a perfect game, and it very much is in a lot of ways, though I do wish the game had gone a little further to actually differentiate the gameplay part a little bit more. Just the Tetris part, I wish there was a little more going on than just basic Tetris, and there is a little bit. You've got the bonus effect that you can activate, but still, at the end of the day, it feels like basic Tetris, which is cool, but I do wish they'd gone a little further. But either way, the game is fantastic, and I recommend it to everybody.
You know how you go a little bit farther? By making a PSVR version of 3D Tetris from the Virtual Boy.
Oh man, there you go.
You can have it in all red mode too. It'd be glorious.
Oh god, you guys have sold me on this game so much. Like, just talking about the demo, because I missed out on the demo. I have not actually played this game. I've seen people play it. I've seen people show gameplay, and it's like I want to try it out. And actually, I went so far to finally pick up the headphones that Ash always talks about, how he loves his PS4 headphones, and so I got those in preparation for Tetris Effect whenever that finally does come, and I'm looking forward to seeing if I get that same experience as you, John, just turning off all the lights, putting on the headphones, playing the game, see if I can get right into it. Because the funny thing is that this will be the second year in a row I've bought Tetris because of Puyo Puyo Tetris. It's like, man,
right.
Tetris is really coming back in a major way. Who knew? But I am really looking forward to checking it out, although I am a little disappointed that there's no multiplayer in Tetris Effect. That is very strange to me, because I can just imagine how wild that would be, having two people dueling each other in this environment.
I wonder if they thought maybe that would be at odds with kind of what they were going for.
And that's what I wonder.
Yeah.
It's possible. I think Tetris Effect it kind of focuses on being a spiritual experience, whereas Puyo Puyo Tetris is more like a Tetris party game. And for that reason, both of them are very distinct, and they both have their merits for those reasons. But I do get where you're coming from. They could have had just a simplified mode with multiplayer in, and that would have been fine. Puyo Puyo Tetris exists for that, if you want that kind of experience.
We need a Puyo Puyo Tetris in VR now.
There we go. Flawless.
Alright, my number 3, like Ash, is Celeste. I thought this is a fantastic game. We've already said so much about it between Ash's great description as well as our previous category awards. One point I just want to touch on a little bit more again, that, as I said before, is something that I think kind of gets overlooked a little bit, not intentionally, is just the fact is how well the gameplay ties into the narrative of this game. They did such a great job of having the gameplay tell the story of how your character, Madeline, is actually feeling throughout. How it's like it's just a perfect marriage. I don't think I've seen a game with gameplay that complements the actual narrative as well as this, where you actually do feel what she's going through the challenges presented in the game. It's just fantastically done. The presentation is great. I love, as we said earlier, the sound effects for when the characters are talking, which are Banjo-Kazooie-esque, but even more emotive. Like, you can hear the hurt in Madeline's voice whenever, like, she's worried or scared or nervous or afraid of pushing forward. It's just so well done. Just everything about this game, as John said, if it had a bigger budget, it wouldn't have mattered. It might even come at the expense of the game. I just love how it is now, and I wouldn't want it any other way. So, Celeste is a fantastic game, just all around.
I mean, I might as well piggyback off of that, because Celeste is my number 2 game of the year. It really is just that good. As I said in the categories videos, I played Celeste entirely on the train in handheld mode, so it was maybe not even the best way to fully lose yourself, but man, did those hours pass by on that train. I was just involved, and I couldn't stop playing, and I loved it for that. And one of the things I'm going to bring up, because you guys are talking about how a bigger budget wouldn't have helped it, wouldn't make it any better, but it is interesting to see what the budget they're at has improved, or at least their expertise, because there is a way to play the original concept for Celeste, where it is just climbing a mountain and using those mechanics and getting farther and farther up. And that is fun on its own, but the main game is so much better than what that was, and to see that those ideas expand and bloom into something so wonderful and beautiful is really great to see. And it recently came out that they've sold 500,000 copies so far, which is great, but man, I hope us just talking about this game more and more gets more people to try it out, and maybe I should check that out and have something to play between Smash matches or on trips or something like that, because I can't recommend it enough. It's great for trips because it's pick up, play, you'll have a wonderful experience, and it really did just resonate that much with me. And the funny thing is, I didn't even play the B-side or C-sides content. I just played the main story. I could easily go back and do those challenges, although I do hear from some people that they don't like those as much because they are a bit more on the unfair side, and that's where the frustration really comes in. So it kind of dilutes the experience, even though it does provide more content.
I wonder too if it kind of exists outside of the like the narrative that made the game so strong too, right? I haven't played them myself, so I could be off base here. Maybe there's more to it, but I think part of what made the experience what it is, as I said already, is the narrative. And if it's lacking that, or lacking the same punch that does, I can see why it may be less interesting compared to the main game.
Yeah, I think the fact that Derek stopped after the main game kind of speaks volumes for that, though. Because this is a full experience. When you play from beginning to end, that is basically the full game, and you don't need to play more. But the B and C side tracks exist for those who want more. And they really do push the fundamentals of Celeste to the limit. They are hard. They're extremely hard. I think people kind of sometimes criticize the game for being hard. Whereas I'd say basically the hard levels are optional content, and you don't really need to ever touch them. And I think just Derek being satisfied with the main game is just an example of that.
Yeah, I really couldn't agree more. I didn't bother with the B-sides or C-sides either, and actually, even as I played through the main game, I didn't bother really going for many of the strawberries either. I did at the beginning, and then I realized, well, the game tells you they literally have no value other than just, for bragging rights. And really, for me, the star of that game is not only the story, but the way the story is intertwined and married with the gameplay. But when you strip the story out of that, and you just have the gameplay, it's still really strong platforming gameplay, but it does have that huge focus on just absolute challenge, and just, it does get incredibly, ridiculously difficult, and when you're trying to go for some of those strawberries, as well as the B-sides and C-sides, and I just didn't find that as enjoyable, so I tend to agree with those criticisms. When you do take that narrative element, I do think Celeste loses a bit of its luster, and so I didn't find the gameplay itself to be arresting enough for me to want to go for 100% and really brave all those crazy challenges, but it's still, the fundamentals there are really strong.
Yeah, I think you said it pretty much right there. I mean, I really like the gameplay, but it's the magic of how it ties into the story and narrative that makes Celeste what it is. So yeah, you take out half of that, and it's not, it wouldn't be the same experience.
Right.
All right. Well, Ash, what is your number 2?
Man, this is hard. So basically, I went back on my number 1 and 2 over and over again, and these really they're pretty fluid. They could go either way, but I ultimately settled on Super Smash Bros. Ultimate as my number 2.
You did ultimately settle on it.
Oh man, I sure did. I didn't even hear that as I said it. But, this one's hard, because I feel like this could very easily be my number 1, but I don't feel as though I've had enough time with it to really make that determination. It did only come out 2 weeks ago. And a lot of that 2 weeks, was spent playing the game in an unorthodox way in order to capture compilation footage for the channel. So I don't really feel as though I've had a decent, just gameplay period with this game, at least not enough to confidently say it's my number 1 game of the year. That said, it could be, just because there's so much incredible, to say about this game. The content is just off the wall. There's so much content in this game. The gameplay is arguably the best it's ever been in the history of Smash. I'm certainly feeling that way so far. The roster is hands down the best fighting game roster ever, of all time. There's no argument. It's just crazy. Over 70 characters. I never expected that. Over 100 stages. And there's so much content in terms of the single-player content, although, some of that does get quite repetitive, so it's hard to say how actually great that single-player content is. But I've been having a good time with the Spirit Board, and maybe less so with World of Light, but I have been enjoying the Spirit Board as well. So, unfortunately, I did have to marathon Classic Mode for the compilation, so I didn't get to quite enjoy that the way I wish I would have. But, I've been having a great time with the game, had a really fun launch party with it. On the other hand, it is hard for me to overlook the fact that the vast majority of the content in this game, even if it is refreshed, it's not necessarily new. This is, by far the Smash Brothers game with the least amount of new content that we've ever seen. Unless, of course, you count the remastered Melee stages and such, but I don't personally count those as completely new. So, there is a lot of returning content here, only 4 new stages. The roster doesn't feel like quite as crazy massive as an update from Smash 4 as Smash 4 did from Brawl, but the game is still incredible, and the content on display is amazing, and even if it doesn't feel quite as new to me as Smash 4 did, it's still an incredible game, and I'm going to be playing it for years to come, and I do feel like, again, it could easily be my number 1, but Haven't had enough time with it to really decide that, so it's definitely a good number 2.
I have a feeling that game's going to appear probably in all of our lists. To piggyback off you there, Ash, it's also my number 2 game. And also to piggyback off you, it was very, very hard to say whether it was number 2 or number 1, because it really could go either way. It's such a massive undertaking, this game. There's so much content. But I think the way I made my decision was when I look back at 2018, like years from now, what game is going to be the defining game of that year for me? And I don't think it is going to be Smash. And it's still it's a remarkable game with so much content, and we are going to be playing it for years and years and years. Since launch, I've basically been juggling like Ridley and Pichu and Simon and just a few other characters, but there are 70 more of these. Like, how on earth am I going to get through all of these characters? It's going to take a long time. And yeah, it's so fun. It's really fun. The mechanics are great. Probably the best they've ever been. I love how they found this aggressive balance, because in Smash Wii U, people would just sort of roll everywhere and just avoid attacks and dodge. It made matches feel very slow and very flaily,
defensive.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I just like how they've sort of punished you for doing that now. And not only do you get like less invincibility frames, but it seems just sort of charging around and being actually aggressive and jumping into combat is the way to go with this combat system. And as Andre's been saying as well, the online feels way better. And there are still instances where it's not better. There are still instances where you will find laggy matches, but for me, on the general, I've just found it really consistent. And that's not going to be true for everyone, but Smash Ultimate just feels like the culmination. It's the ultimate Smash Bros. Game. It really is. And yeah, so it's not my number 1, but it's so close.
I have got to stop going last and everything, because by the time it gets to me, you've all said everything, but yes, my number 2 is also Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. I swear to God, if one of you beats me to my number 1, I'm gonna lose it. Smash Bros. Ultimate, yeah, I mean, I think, as you all said, it really is an Ultimate Smash Bros. Game. It has basically all the content. It's a fantastic gameplay experience. It has, I think, the best gameplay in the series. I was just over at my friend's place over the weekend with a few others, and we played 8 hours of this game. In total. And the second time we've done this in a week. I have not sunk that much time into a game in a multiplayer sense in probably a decade, since Brawl probably. So yeah, I mean, this game is it's a ton of fun. It has so much content that even after all this time, going by my system clock, I put 170 hours into it. A lot of that, yeah, it's probably not that high based on like just sitting around and whatnot, but regardless, it's a ton of time, and I still have not adequately played every character in this game. There are still some I've barely been able to touch, so that is remarkable in and of itself. However, as you all said, it's also the least new Smash Brothers game. It has the least amount of new content of any game in the series, and I completely understand why that's the case. And in some sense, I think it had to be the case in order to make it the ultimate Smash. But at the same time, that combined with the fact that this is effectively the 6th iteration of this gameplay concept. While it is the best version of it, in my opinion, it's also it's starting to just wear a little bit thin now. And that sounds harsher than I actually mean it. Like, it's just that it's not as exciting as it used to be. I'm still having a blast with it. I really do enjoy what the game is. At the same time, a fresher experience beat it out for my number 1. So, Smash Bros. Ultimate is fantastic. Had it come out maybe as a 4th or 5th entry, or 3rd or 4th entry, I should say, it would undoubtedly be, almost undoubtedly be my game of the year. But just through it being the 6th version in, 20 years of these, the hype's worn down just a little bit, so...
It's still my number 1, which is funny to me because I'm the only one that put Super Smash Bros. Ultimate as my favorite, because I've probably played it the least out of all of you, because I haven't actually been able to play it for a few days because of doing other, basically covering content about Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. But I really do love this game. I enjoy the World of Light mode and going through that and seeing all the clever ideas that they have for these spirit battles and doing those videos. It's really interesting to see how that goes. The classic mode is the best it's ever been. There's a lot of multiplayer options for whenever I do finally get a chance to play locally with friends, and even playing online has been a ton of fun. I don't feel the frustration I do with a lot of other fighting games where it's just like, screw this, I'm just getting my butt kicked all the time, I hate this, I just don't want to play online, and I haven't gotten that feeling yet, which is really nice. Now granted, it might be because I haven't had a chance to really sit down and dive into it as much as others have. This is by far my favorite Smash Brothers. I like the mechanics of Smash 4 and what that brought to the table, and I really did enjoy it, but I just never got into the side content that one provided. So yeah, while that one had a lot of new stuff to enjoy, I didn't care about any of it. And this is all stuff that I care about, stuff that I actually enjoy doing. And granted, a lot of that is, again, because me not going through it and being able to take my time, like, okay, I'll do a little bit of classic mode, I'll do a little bit of online, I'll try out some of the challenges, okay, I'll work through World of Light a little bit more, and being able to just vary what I'm doing at any given time and still being able to enjoy it fully. I've really appreciated it. It's that perfect balance that I've been wanting from a Smash Brothers game ever since probably Melee. Like Brawl, I kind of got it as well, but at that point I was kind of at the point where Andre's at right now, where I was starting to get a little tired of the formula. It wasn't quite clicking with me anymore, but I still enjoyed it. And with Ultimate, it's finally come back to a point where I've just fully enjoyed what they've had to offer, and I really, really do like the game, and I can't wait to play more. I still need to fight you guys. I haven't fought you guys at all yet, so I gotta see how I hold up. But it really is just my favorite game of the year, because it's just pure fun, and I can see myself playing this one a lot more than any previous Smash game up to this point.
Yeah, I kind of like think about what it's like for someone who's never played Smash before, and they just see the 70 roster of characters and 100 stages and all these modes. It's like they must be lost for years. But there is a lot of new content too, actually. We've been going on about how it feels like a lot of the same, but there is a lot of new stuff. All the newcomers basically feel distinct. Like Simon and Ridley and Inkling. Inkling is so distinct. No one plays like Inkling. And then there's new stuff too, like the Final Smash meter. But this is all really great stuff, which all complements the main fighting. Whereas I guess other Smash games had a lot of bonus modes and extra things to do. This one just sort of focuses on the core principles of Smash, and I think it kind of benefits just from being so focused.
That's a good point. A lot of the newness, too, of this game comes out from, by the way, of how it recontextualizes the existing content, whether it's through new options or modes, like the Final Smash meter, Smashdown, or Squad Strike. It's all stuff that finds new, interesting uses for content that's existed largely throughout the years, and I love that, because it really does make the game feel different. Stage Morph as well is another feature worth calling out. Another one of those kind of off-the-wall ideas that totally works and makes the game just really fun as a result.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, Andre, is Stage Morph. I just wanted to call that out as probably the perfect example of a feature that redefines existing content and just makes it fun again in a completely whole new way. And not that they're not already fun if you just play them on, without Stage Morph fun, but it just completely takes these 100+ stages you have, most of which you've seen before if you're a serious fan, and just completely turns them on their ear by giving you the choice to, literally morph between them during a single match. And I just think that's one of the coolest features that Smash Ultimate brings to the table.
I want in Smash Bros. Ultimate 2 is a feature that a Stage Morph that only lifts some of the elements from each stage and puts it into another. I want F-Zero cars and Electroplankton.
Oh man.
That'd be really cool.
I'm pretty sure that's impossible, but I want it.
My biggest complaint with Ultimate, though, does have to do with the spirits. Mainly the fact that we don't get any context about these spirits. There's no information about them. Sometimes they barely list what game they're from. Like, you have no idea, or that you just don't get that much information. Like, it blew my mind when I was like, when I got to that spirit where it's girl from Hanamari no Mori. I'm like, oh, okay, she must be the protagonist. That's my assumption because she doesn't have a name. Nope, she actually has a name and a full story behind her. So I miss that aspect of learning about Nintendo's history. Now we're just getting images of Nintendo's history, and you got to go look it up yourself and try to find what it has to do. And
that's good for us.
Exactly, it's good for us.
There's a video series that does that for you.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I wish I had that did it for me. I don't have that. I get to do all that research myself, and I mean, it still makes it very interesting when I do look up all those references, but it's just to have just a little more context. Like, sometimes it feels like they don't even tell you exactly what game they're from or like anything else about it. It just feels sort of there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I completely see why they stripped out collectible trophies. Obviously, they took a lot of work to model and prepare, and I totally get that. But I do miss the historical aspect of them, and even if they couldn't go with full descriptions, I also get that. That's a ton of work. But it would be nice if they just had maybe in the details section, like, just some bullet points, like 2 or 3 bullet points. This character is from this game. This is the role they play in this game, and maybe like a cool little bit of trivia. It doesn't have to be a full description, like, I get that, but I do wish there was at least some sort of context for where all these characters fit into Nintendo's history. Obviously, you have a ton, like the vast majority of them are obvious if you've been a Nintendo fan for any length of time, but there are so many. Also, there are so many deep cuts that they're genuinely characters I've never heard of before. It would be nice if there were even maybe just 2 or 3 bullet points just giving you some basic information on the character and their overall place in Nintendo's history.
I'm kind of mixed on it because, on the one hand, I think part of the magic of World of Light, which granted is a mode I kind of played into pretty heavily, part of what makes it fun and unique is that you have to tease out these connections. Like, what makes these spirits what they are, like how do these conditions tie into the idea of that character, and that's really neat. Like when you kind of pull at the thread and realize like all the little details that they just used the gameplay to represent, that can be fantastic. But then again, as you were saying, there's so many spirits here, so many that even people who've grown up with games for decades like us just don't recognize. Like there were Costa spirits in there that I had no idea about their background. And when that happens, then the magic is gone. It just feels like a random battle, and you don't understand the context for that. Yeah, so I kind of agree. Like, it would have been nice, I suppose, if they had just a brief setup. I mean, even something as brief as how they used to do event mode, where there was a little, description of what's going on in the fight. Something like that would have just helped provide a starting point for unraveling the rest of the battle.
Other than that, though, I love this game.
All right, Ash, what is your number 1?
Oh man, here we go. All right, so I do want to preface this with the fact that there is one other game that could potentially have taken this spot if it was eligible. And I just want to highlight how fantastic that game is because it isn't eligible, and that is Ys 8 Lacrimosa of Dana. And it's not eligible because it came out on PS4 last year in September, I think, and I didn't get to play it. Then I ended up reviewing the Switch version, but it's technically considered a port, which means it's not eligible for this category. But when I think back on the year of the year in gaming for me, Ys 8 comes up as a hugely positive memory, and it's just such a fantastic game, and I cannot sing its praises enough. And that may very well be what had gone in this space if ports were eligible. I'm not sure. But since it's not eligible, I have to say I'm a little surprised by this because it's a flawed game, as we've already talked about, but I think my number 1 game of the year, at least in terms of my emotional highs and lows and my overall memories of it, is Octopath Traveler. Really? And I say that fully knowing that it is flawed. We went over the reasons that it's flawed already when Derek talked about it. The individual stories don't ever really coalesce into something more meaningful in the end. That doesn't really come together into that shared story like some people are hoping. The battle system can get really repetitive. The random encounter rate can be too high. Thankfully, there is an in-game ability you can do that you can equip that can kind of take the sting off of that. But there are problems with this game. This team has made games in the past that kind of didn't have those problems, such as Bravely Second, Bravely Default, where you can set the random encounter rate yourself. And I do think this game would have benefited from options like that. But I gotta say, like Derek said, what this game does, it does so incredibly well. And there are so many great moments of character drama, and the writing is so good, and the gameplay, it's not even just about the story and the music and everything. I've had so many great gameplay memories of this game because there are so many boss fights where it's a close shave. The game does a great job of knowing how strong you typically should be, unless you're completely trying to break the game, which some people do. But typically, the game does a really good job of estimating how strong you're going to be and really pushing your party to its limits and giving you some battles that you're really just skirting by on the skin of your teeth. And it's a lot of fun, and that's, of course, to say nothing of the phenomenal music, and it's easily my favorite soundtrack of the year. Not only does the music stand incredibly well on its own, but it took all these great character moments and these dramatic set pieces and the boss fights and everything, and just made them that much better. And so, yeah, it's a little repetitive. It's got some mechanical issues. Absolutely, I recognize them, but I gotta say, when I look back on the year in gaming and my favorite memories and the game I keep thinking of, if it's not Ys 8, it's Octopath Traveler. Despite its flaws, I probably would have given it a lot, like you did, Derek. It still stands out as just my most memorable. It's the game I keep going back to when I think of my favorite games throughout the year. And so I gotta hand it to Octopath Traveler.
I'm really surprised.
Me too.
We've been speaking for over 30 minutes, and you have not said the word Mega Man once.
I know, I knew that was going to come up.
launching this year, and Mega Man being in Smash. You've not said his name once.
I know. Well, I got to be fair about it. And the straight truth is, I liked Mega Man 11 a lot. I gave it a lot, and it's in my top 5. It would have been number 4 or 5. I don't know which one, but it's just we're a top 5 list. You'd be hearing me talk about Mega Man, but I can't put Mega Man 11 in the top 3 just because I love Mega Man and I've been waiting forever for a new game, and it's a great game, but it just doesn't quite hit those highs, and it's just not quite as memorable as I feel as it needs to be in my top 3. Like, again, it's a great game, it's fantastic level design, but the Wily Castle portion is too short, and it feels kind of half-baked, and especially compared to prior Mega Man games. So I have to be honest with myself and say, yes, I liked it a lot, but it's not quite top 3 material for me, at least.
And that's fair. And I can totally see why you would put Octopath Traveler as your favorite game of the year. As you said, it does have its fair share of problems, but there are some moments in almost every story where you just feel it, and it's like, man, this is so rough. And I like how they balance it. Some are very light and airy, and the stakes never get too high. Others are just like, wow, I can't believe they're talking about this subject in this game with this art
That's
style.
for sure.
And it's like, wow, I can't believe they're doing that. But it works at all times. They have this wonderful balance between all of them. And it's really fun because you can see who everybody picks as their first character, and great voice acting across the board. It's a great game with issues, but still a great game.
Yeah, I'm glad you actually brought up the characters because, as we said in our category awards earlier, Octopath Traveler also gave me my favorite new character of 2018, who's Elephant. I just love that guy. He's such a good guy. And I do have to mention the fact that I feel a little silly because a couple of years ago, I nominated another of this team's games for my Game of the Year, which was Bravely Second. But what's funny about it is that in that year, there was no question. Like, Bravely Second was my Game of the Year. I didn't even have to think about it. It was just objectively my favorite game of the year in so many ways. But with Octopath Traveler, it wasn't that clear-cut. Like, I really had a hard time going back and forth between Octopath, Smash, and to a degree, Ys 8, even though it ended up not qualifying. So it's not quite as cut and dried like Bravely Second was, but this team I guess they just know what strikes a chord with me, because many of the same things Bravely Second did, Octopath Traveler does, albeit not as well in some ways, but in other ways it's even better. Like, that soundtrack is just, oh my god, it's just insane. So yeah, I'm as surprised as you are, John, and maybe as the rest of you are, that it ended up being my favorite game of the year. But like you said, Derek, despite its flaws, there's some solid reasoning as to why I feel like it's the most memorable experience I had this year with a game.
I'm not just surprised that Mega Man didn't make your top 3. I'm surprised it didn't take all 3 slots of your top 3.
I know. It should have been Mega Man and 11, my top 3.
No, it should have been Mega Man 11, Legacy Collection, X Legacy Collection,
Nice.
And then Original Legacy Collection.
Exactly.
All right, John, how about you? What's your top game of the year?
Oh, okay. So first I want to say I'm actually very happy we've all sort of chosen different games here. It's a nice little mix.
So far, until you ruined it for me, John.
Well, I think we have different picks, Andre, I think.
All right.
So my number 1 is Celeste. We've all said Celeste in some capacity, but it is taking my number 1. And I think that's because I think the reason for that is because it just feels special. It feels like a special game that sort of defines this year for me. Like, when I think about Smash Ultimate, it's a great game. It's a brilliant game that I'll be playing for years and years, but it's not the defining title of the year. Whereas Celeste, it feels fresh. It feels like a platformer that doesn't do things that other platformers do. Basically, the way Celeste works is every single screen is kind of its own contained level, and it just has these micro challenges you have to keep sort of accomplishing as you make your way up the mountain. Think how Meat Boy works. Meat Boy is a very quick game too, with hard levels, but they're all very short. And Celeste is just kind of an adventure of that, an adventure that just sort of keeps going, whereas Meat Boy is all segmented. And I think that because of Celeste's structure, it just feels that the flow in that game feels brilliant. I have a weird thing about double jumps. I don't like double jumps. and Celeste is a game with a double jump that I actually do like. But Celeste has more of like a mid-air maneuver. That's not a normal double jump. So I think just the way it has all these different platforming mechanics that work so well together. You have the climb, you have the flow in the air, you have a normal jump. All of these have limitations, but they all sort of relish in those limitations. And as we said earlier, Celeste is a game about limitations, and it makes them all work. We've all said numerous reasons why this game's so good. It's the story, it's the music, it's the gameplay, it's the flow, it's how varied it is, it's how it pushes you down, then pushes you back up. And all those reasons are legit. And yeah, I do think that the B-side and C-side levels can get too hard at times. But they're hard for people who want it to be hard. You can quite easily finish the game and just have enough there. And the thing is, I've played Smash Ultimate way longer than Celeste. but I think Celeste resonates with me more. It's a game I've played for maybe 20 hours, and that's fine. It doesn't need to be a 100-hour game to be the most special game in my memory. And so Smash Ultimate was really, really close, but Celeste just beats it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's totally fair. I mean, I don't factor playtime at all into my consideration for top 3. Otherwise, Stardew Valley would probably win every year. Yeah, I mean, you said it right there. Like, the game is just fantastic. That game really just slot in just perfectly into anywhere, I feel like, in our top games of the year. Just because there's so many reasons for why you can say this game is great. And this is one of the few games that pulls it off in almost every way. Like, the visuals, the music, the gameplay, the narrative, which is something so few games like really nail to me. Like, that marriage of gameplay and narrative is something Celeste does better than almost any other. A huge point of consideration for it, I think, and I'm glad I made one of our top ones, honestly. So, thank you, John, for pulling through on that.
I wonder if people are tired of us talking about it, because I'm pretty sure it's taken over half of our discussion for
sure.
like a 3 hour, 3 hours worth of discussion.
You know why? Because 500,000 copies is not enough for this game, Derek. It needs more.
It really, yeah. You know, it's funny, Andre, you touched on something that made me think about the fact that, there are AAA development studios who spend just thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars trying to chase that idea of realism and bringing you into the game and making you feel like you're there. And Celeste does it, and it does it with 2 dimensions, pixel graphics, and an incredibly relatable character named Madeline. And it absolutely proves that you don't need lifelike, realistic, photorealistic graphics. You don't need crazy cutscenes. Like, that stuff has its place, and that's fine, but you can, spend all the money you want trying to bring players into your game and make them feel like they're there, but you don't necessarily need to do that. Look at Celeste does it, and it does it beautifully. It does it almost effortlessly, and it does it from the perspective of a 2D pixelated game, but it absolutely makes you feel like you're there on that mountain, experiencing the struggles that Madeline experiences, and it's really fantastic in that way, and in so many other ways.
It really is. I don't know how much more we can say about it without just repeating ourselves at this point.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll go ahead and move on to my personal choice for a top game of the year. So obviously this may come as a huge shock. I'm kind of a fan of Nintendo games. I tend to like them a lot. I know. I'm sure it's blowing some of your minds right now. However, this year was a little bit light on them, at least in terms of brand new ones. I thought this year was great in terms of general content. However, it was light in terms of brand new experiences, with a lot of the games being ports. So if ports were eligible, there's a good chance that Tropical Freeze would be somewhere on my list, if not in all 3 positions, because I love that game. However, Tropical Freeze is 4 years old. It came on the Wii U originally, so it is not eligible, which is why my top slot is going to the game that I found to be the most Nintendo-like this year, and that will be Astrobot. This game is fantastic. It is how if Nintendo made VR games, this is the closest we would see to what that might look like, I feel like. Because the Virtual Boy, I don't think was a very good idea of what we could expect from that. Astrobot just captures this platforming magic, which is something we don't see too often these days, especially with how it incorporates a brand new way of playing games. So there have been a lot of comparisons, obviously, to Mario 64 with how it took advantage of a new medium, and while I think it might, I don't think that quite captures, or I don't know if I agree with that to the full extent someone may have been using it. I absolutely can see the comparisons in some limited circumstances, because this game really does make fantastic use of VR, with how it pulls you into the world, not just through the visuals and the presentation and just how lively these worlds feel, but also about making you a character within the world. So I guess real quick, to actually further the Mario 64 comparison, one of my favorite parts about Mario 64 is just a small little moment at the end of the game, so spoilers, is after you beat Bowser and you return to the castle, you get the kiss from Princess Peach, and then Peach walks off to go bake you a cake or whatever, and then Mario starts following her into the castle, but then he looks up at the camera for just a brief moment, and then continues on. And it's like an acknowledgement of you, the player, which also was portrayed by Lakitu in the game. And similarly, in this game, your viewpoint is a character that exists within the world, and this allows you to interact with the world as that character. I mean, for instance, you can change your viewpoint, of course, by leaning around. You can look around corners, but you can also interact directly with it by headbutting projectiles back at enemies, or knocking down walls with your head. It's kind of awesome. But what really ties in the Mario 64 comparison is the fact that the little adorable robot you control, Astrobot, whenever he makes eye contact with you, he waves. It's freaking adorable. Like, I can't get over it. Like, my heart melts every time he waves. I'm like, that is adorable. So this game really is just kind of magical with just how well the platforming works, how it introduces those mechanics in a new medium, the overall like vibe, the just like the happy, joyous vibe of this game. The infectious music is just great. Like, it really only has like one song, but it evolves over the course of the game, matching the environment you're in, and I love that. And each one, like each iteration of it is just so catchy. The boss fights are some of the best I've seen in a platforming game in quite some time outside of Tropical Freeze, and again, really capture that Nintendo-esque feel, like with how these fights evolve as well. In the final battle, my god, it is something truly incredible. So yeah, Astrobot for me is my game of the year. It is like, I say it's Nintendo-like, and it is, but it's also selling it short. But this game really does stand on its own as a fantastic entry from Sony that really takes advantage of a new medium. And if you have a PSVR and haven't tried this yet, pick it up. If you don't have a PSVR, consider it. I'm not saying you should. It's really expensive. It's a pain in the ass to deal with all those cords. But if you've been thinking about it, this game may be the one that pushes you over the edge. Because Astrobot is truly a magical experience, and I highly recommend it to anyone that typically loves Nintendo platformers.
I love that pick, Andre.
It's great.
I think it's such a clever game too. Like, when you look at other VR games, I mean, there are impressive ones, but most of them just kind of take existing gameplay mechanics and just put them in VR. A lot of them are first-person games, and there's no problem with that, but it doesn't really justify why this game should be in VR. Like, when I play Resident Evil 7, it's very atmospheric, but it's still the same game. It's just, you know, from a different viewpoint. And it makes me think about how a lot of developers transition to 3D. Like, with Crash Bandicoot, they kind of looked at 2D level design and just sort of turned it on its, like, flipped it on its side. So it was still operating by the rules of 2D, just in a 3D plane. And then Nintendo looked at Mario, and they're like, oh, we have to, like, reinvent this to work in 3D. And it feels like Astrobot is that in VR. Like, they're not just using what could work without VR and putting it in VR. They've completely, like, thought, like, how could this work in VR? How can we justify virtual reality with this game? I think it's going to be such a special game in the turning point for what VR games are about.
I've heard so many great things about this game, not only from you, Andre, but just every time I read about it, every time someone brings it up, a thread pops up about it on Resetera. It's just, I see nothing but praise for this game across the board. And as someone for whom VR is still relatively new, I mean, I've played various VR games over the years, but I've never owned a VR platform. I've never had ready access to a library of VR games. So even though I've played VR before on multiple occasions, I still feel like it's a fairly new technology to me. So for me, it's kind of an unexplored frontier. And I don't feel like I've played that many defining VR games, and this is one I absolutely want to play because obviously I love platformers. I love Nintendo platformers, and every experience I play that seems tailored to VR, like, Res Infinite, games like that, it's been groundbreaking. It feels amazing, and I can't personally, having not played Astrobot, I can't quite wrap my head around what it must be like to play a really, really good platformer within VR space, but I want to know what this game's all about. I hear great things across the board, and if I can, again, investing in a PSVR with its a million wires is a bit much for me in terms of the barrier of entry, but if I can get a friend who, has a VR or PSVR that I could just borrow for a week or so and just really devour this game, I completely intend to, because as you said, Andre, I just hear amazing things about it.
Yeah, that's what I did. I borrowed a PSVR, except instead of a week, it was almost 2 years. So
right.
It's just really cool, and it shows so I was no stranger to VR before I started playing Astrobot, and while I've enjoyed VR a lot, I also found a lot of it kind of gimmicky, and maybe that's not the best word, but a lot of games don't really seem to be doing a whole lot with it. Like, they just kind of throw you into VR and they think that's enough for the experience, and Astrobot's one of the first games that really feels fleshed out, thought out in a way that can really take advantage of this medium. As I said before, it really makes you yourself a character in the game, both, literally and figuratively, but also, with how you can interact with the world and how Astrobot reacts to your presence and enemies as well. I love that element to it. It gives you such a great sense of presence, where even without the character angle, which I like how you actually play a character in the game, but even without that, the world itself just feels like it just envelopes you, and with how you can lean around corners to better gauge where things are, or the distance, or better see how you want to platform around this world. Like 3D controls of platforming games have always been an issue. It's something Nintendo's struggled with themselves at times, even though they're often the ones who gets closest to getting it right. And I'm not sure how the Astrobot developers pulled it off, but this game feels near flawless the entire time, even when Astrobot's like 50 feet away from you, and you can kind of almost barely see what's going on. It still feels natural, and that doesn't happen too often, by the way. But they did such a great job making the controls just work in this completely 3D world, or in this completely 3D environment that surrounds you. I love it. So
nice. I remember seeing in an interview for 3D Land, Nintendo have always struggled to make blocks work in a 3D space, like floating blocks. And the reason for that is because it's very hard to perceive exactly where you are in relation to those blocks. And that's why in 3D Land that's why they went with the 2D 3D style, because now you can actually tell when you're below the block without just looking at your shadow. And I guess that's also transferable to VR, 'cause they're very similar mediums. And I love all these Nintendo comparisons too, because Nintendo do it a lot. They look at characters and they make them into gameplay functions. Like Lakitu is a camera, Navi is Z targeting, and I guess in Astrobot you're kind of Lakitu as well. You're the camera,
right?
But it's just such a Nintendo decision to characterize gameplay mechanics.
It is.
Yes, a lot of people do say Astrobot's like a Nintendo platformer that Nintendo didn't make, and it really does sound like it is. I mean, I haven't played it properly myself either, but I really need to. You really sold it on me.
I think you have to. Yeah, you owe it to yourself, John.
What I am impressed with, though, is I think this might be the first time all four of us have chosen, or all of us have chosen, a different game for our Game of the Year.
Yeah.
It might be.
Yeah, that's true, Derek. Yeah, that's pretty surprising.
All very varied choices too. Mine was an indie game, yours was a Sony game, Derek's was Nintendo, and Ash's was a Square game. All very, very different titles.
Yeah. Indeed. I like that. That just goes to show how strong this year was, even with it being very port heavy for Nintendo. So
yeah.
All right, guys. Well, any final thoughts at all on our games of the year? Anything else you want to get out there about any of them, or are we about done here?
Tropical Freeze is actually game of the year.
It truly is. I mean, of course. Even without VR, it doesn't need it.
I guess on that note, if we're going to mention Tropical Freeze, I should say, if you haven't played Okami, go play it on Switch, because it's awesome, and it would be my game of the year otherwise, and every year it comes out, because it's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, this year was really good in terms of ports, too. Like, we discounted it, otherwise we'd be discussing a lot of old games, I think, potentially. But yeah, this year was very strong for, like, well-produced ports for Nintendo Switch, and I'm sure other platforms as well. But Nintendo Switch in particular had a great lineup of fantastic games that you may have seen before, but yeah, now it's funky.
Yeah. And there's lots of great Switch ports too, like Bayonetta 1 and 2 came out at the start of the year.
That's right.
They were brilliant ports. Dragon Quest Builders, Dark Souls, there's lots of stuff that came out on Switch this year. And if you haven't played those games before, now's your chance. Like, Bayonetta 2 is one of the best in its genre, Dark Souls is one of my favourite games, Tropical Freeze, as we've said before, is one of the best platformers ever, so if you missed out on those, give them a chance. And Ash seems really, really happy with Ys 8 as well, so yeah,
Yes.
for sure go for that.
Indeed. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap it up at, so let us know what you guys thought of our choices for Game of the Year, and what's your personal Game of the Year. Let us know by posting in the comments below. Otherwise, keep it on GameXplain for tons more on, actually 2018 in general. We'll have a full wrap-up at the end of the year, discussing our general thoughts about everything that happened this past year for Nintendo, as well as our expectations going into 2019, so stay tuned for that. And of course, make sure to like and follow us on Facebook and Twitter at GameXplain. You can find links to those in the description below. Just go keep updated on everything we post. And yeah, just stay tuned for tons more on Nintendo, Nintendo Switch, and everything else Nintendo. Lots of Nintendo stuff happening. We'll catch you later. Bye.